All right, today we're going to dive into a pretty radical way of looking at the Bible. What if it's not a static rule book at all, but something way more alive, like an operating manual for a living system?
For centuries, the Bible's often been treated as this collection of laws or a story about saving individual souls. But what if that's just scratching the surface? What if we've been misreading the user manual this whole time?
And that leads us to the core idea of this whole explainer. What if the Bible is actually describing the operational physics of a huge living system? A system that we're all a part of, a system we just call the world. To even start to wrap our heads around this, we have to see creation itself in a totally new way.
And that new way is this. We need to stop thinking of the world as a machine and start seeing it as a living, breathing body.
Just think about any living body, your own, for example. To stay healthy, it needs a few things that are totally non-negotiable, right? It needs circulation, it needs cycles of rest, it needs clear boundaries, a way to get rid of waste, and feedback loops to keep everything in balance. When all that is working, the body thrives. When it's not, well, that's when you get disease.
Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. This framework maps those same biological principles directly onto the world. So, the rivers are its veins, the ecosystems are its organs, the soil is basically its blood, and all the animals are its cells. And humanity? Our original job was to be the nervous system, the conscious caretakers meant to keep the whole body healthy. But, as we all know, something went profoundly wrong. The nervous system started acting against the very body it was designed to protect. So, how did the Guardians become a virus?
So the original blueprint, the way it was supposed to work, was for humanity to be guardians. The language in the Bible is literally to tend and to guard the system. But then, a systemic malfunction kicked in. That guardian role got thrown out for something else, something that acts just like a virus, driven by unchecked consumption, limitless growth, and just taking and taking without ever putting anything back.
And look, this metaphor is weirdly precise. A virus really only does three things. It replicates endlessly, it chews through its host's resources without giving anything back, and it damages the host until the whole system collapses. When you take that checklist and hold it up against human history, yeah, the parallels are pretty unsettling.
And this gives us a completely new way of thinking about a word we all know, sin. In this model, sin stops being just about an individual person breaking a rule. It becomes a diagnosis, a systemic malfunction. It's any behavior that hurts the health of the entire living body. Okay, so where does this malfunction even come from? Well, this framework suggests it isn't random. It's a corruption in the system's code itself, a kind of malware it calls Satan's viral logic.
So in this view, forget the cartoon devil with a pitchfork. Think of Satan as a corruption agent. The best analogy is a computer virus, right? A virus doesn't build its own computer, it hijacks the one that's already there, and it uses the system's own functions to tear it apart from the inside.
And these are the lines of bad code it injects. This is the viral logic. Ideas that sound tempting but are absolute poison to a living system. Things like infinite growth in a finite world, or power without responsibility. The idea that rest is for the weak, or that mercy is just inefficient. Once these ideas get into a culture, they spread just like pathogens.
This quote from the source material just nails it. The goal of this corrupting force isn't to build its own kingdom. The goal is simply the collapse itself. It feeds on the breakdown of a system, and then it just moves on to the next host.
Okay, so that sounds pretty bleak. If the system is infected with this viral code, is there an antivirus? This framework says yes, and it's been there all along, built right into the original operating system.
And this is where the reinterpretation gets really compelling. You know those ancient laws from the Old Testament? They're seen here as these elegant system stabilizers. The Sabbath isn't just a religious rule, it's a biological command to prevent system-wide burnout. Jubilee, which demanded releasing all debts, was there to stop wealth clotting, a fatal blockage in the body's circulation. Every law had a specific job to keep the whole system alive and healthy.
So where does Jesus fit into all this? In this framework, he's something incredible. He's the prototype for a perfectly functioning cell. He's the living demonstration of what a human looks like when they are completely aligned with the system's original healthy design.
And just look at the functions of this prototype cell. It's the exact opposite of the virus. It heals instead of extracts. It restores instead of conquers. And this part is crucial. It absorbs the system's toxicity, all the hate and the violence, but refuses to pass it on.
It breaks the chain of infection. It runs on a completely different operating system than the virus of revenge and power.
So let's bring this all home. If we use this map as a diagnostic tool, what does it tell us about the world we're actually living in right now?
Well, when we see a global epidemic of burnout, this model says that's not just millions of individual people failing. It's a predictable symptom of a system that is violating a core biological law, the absolute need for rest cycles. We're redlining the engine, and the engine is starting to break down.
When we look at climate collapse, it stops being just a political debate. It becomes the logical endpoint of that core viral behavior, extraction without restoration, playing out on a global scale. The body is running a fever, and it's showing all the signs of a serious long-term infection. And all the intense social hatred and political division we see everywhere, this framework offers a diagnosis that is, frankly, chilling. It's an autoimmune response. The nervous system, that's us, humanity, is so corrupted by viral logic that the body has started attacking its own cells.
And this leads to one last huge redefinition. The gospel? It's not a fire escape to get you out of a burning building. It's the blueprint for how to put out the fire. It's the user manual for how to heal the world by getting back in sync with its original design.
And that really just leaves us with this final thought to chew on. What if the Bible's whole point isn't about leaving the world behind, but about figuring out how to keep it alive? That's a provocative idea, and definitely one worth thinking about.